Channel open. Welcome back to WeeklyTrek, a proud member of the Tricorder Transmissions podcast network, and now presented in partnership with TrekCore.com. I am your host, Alex Perry.
What's today's date? The date.
Today's show was recorded on December the 5th, 2020, and is current through the Star Trek Discovery episode, The Sanctuary, so beware of spoilers. Though, given we have one Lower Deck story this week, and that show is only available in North America right now, I will be noting in the episode description the time codes for any Lower Decks discussions, so you can skip over it if you choose. All right, let's get into the show.
Good day, Voyager, and welcome to A Briefing with Neelix. It's a catchy title, isn't it?
WeeklyTrek is a 30-minute news show covering the biggest stories from the Star Trek franchise. We are in a new golden age of Star Trek. There are 6 television shows in production, possibly more on the way, and enough merchandise to fill the Bajoran wormhole. So stick with me, and I'll help you sort the real facts from a lot of the Dominion propaganda that you'll find online. But I can't do this alone, and my guest this week is returning guest Caleb Dorsh. Caleb, welcome back to WeeklyTrek.
Hey, Alex, I'm happy to be here.
All right, Caleb, you know the drill. I want to know something that's got you feeling good about Star Trek at the moment. What's got you moving at Warp 10?
Oh my gosh, there are so many possible things that I could use to answer that question, but I ultimately have settled on the teaser for next week's episode. I believe it's called Terra Firma Part 1, and the teaser I'm talking about is coming from Will Wheaton's version of The Ready Room. This clip to me just dropped a little nugget that I absolutely was not expecting. It's a great connection to past iteration of Star Trek, and it makes me really consider a lot of the possible theories related to both the Section 31 show and the burn. So I'm hopefully able to discuss that a bit more at the end of the show, but I was just blown away by that clip, and I'm really excited for next week.
Yeah, it was a very exciting little clip. So the Ready Room, for I think pretty much all the episodes this season, their clips have come from the cold opens of the week's episodes. So presumably this is a scene that comes from the cold open from next week's episode. And since it's a part 1, I anticipate probably comes quite early, so as not to give away anything that happens in the rest of the episode. But yeah, this is a conversation between David Cronenberg back again. Or I guess before we do that, I should say, if you don't want to know what's in the clip, skip ahead a minute because I'm about to explain it to you. But David Cronenberg and Hugh Culber, I'll never know David Cronenberg's character name, just FYI. I know it's Kovic or something like that, but he's going to be David Cronenberg for me for literally forever. And they're talking about how Georgiou, this thing that's been going on with her is because there are consequences for traveling both across from a parallel universe and through time. If you just do one or the other, you're fine. But if you do both together, it has terrible consequences. And he says there's been one case of this in the past, and this alien appears wearing what looks to be a TNG season 1 or 2 uniform. And David Cronenberg's character explains that this is Yor, who was a warrior in the Temporal Wars, which again, another Temporal Cold War reference, fabulous, who traveled not just from a parallel dimension, but from the past. He traveled from 2379, but the parallel dimension he traveled from was a parallel dimension created by a temporal incursion of a Romulan mining vessel into the past, aka Yor is from the TNG era of the Kelvin timeline, which is incredible. I absolutely freaking love it. Like, just what a cool thing to have included in that episode.
Oh, I totally agree. And it makes me wonder also, and we'll get into this with my theory at the end of the podcast, but it makes me wonder what implications that has, both with the Temporal Cold War, if we're going to find out more about that in Discovery, but also are we going to potentially find out things about that related to Picard and the upcoming seasons of that too. So it's going to be an exciting one for sure. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, the thing I'm feeling good about Star Trek this week is John Delancey has relaunched his official website and is offering something quite cool through his website, which is these sort of pieces of art that show Q, and you can have them signed and personalized. And there's like 4 or 5 different pieces of art you can choose from. Not very expensive. I got one, including with the autograph and the personalization. Like I think it was it was like $80 or something like that. And that was with the frame and with the shipping and all of that. And it's just a very cool, fun thing. The one I got it's this illustration of a face-off between Q and Picard in the courtroom in All Good Things. And, John signed it and personalized it to me and put a little note that I asked for. And, obviously we've not had conventions this year. And so there have been few opportunities to, develop a connection with a Star Trek actor. And this is a very cool one. And I'm in the process of putting together a little gallery wall of Star Trek art in my new office. And I'm pretty pleased that this is going to be added to it.
That sounds really awesome. I actually think I saw the tweet when you posted about it, and the art style is great. And it, is really cool that he's going through and doing that for fans. I know some of the conventions, especially the virtual ones at this point, are also now accepting memorabilia from fans. You can send your memorabilia in and get it signed for certain prices and whatnot, rather than just getting the stock photos or whatever that they have there that they pre-sign. So I know that that's also an option, which is cool.
We're figuring it out, and hopefully it will not be too long until we have a return to something close to normality in 2021, and maybe can go to a convention again. That sure would be nice. All right. Well, with that, let's turn to the week's top stories.
There's a war going on, and I'm a reporter.
In a wide-ranging two-part interview with popular Star Trek YouTube host Kit Wolski, Mike McMahan, the creator and executive producer of Star Trek Lower Decks, gave a number of hints about the direction the show will take in Season 2. After Discovery Season 3 has its finale in early January, we don't know how long we will have to wait for the next live-action Star Trek show to premiere, but McMahan assures us that production for Lower Decks Season 2 is racing ahead. Not only is it all written, he said, but I've got episode 209 to watch over this week in animatic format, and we have already sent the first 4 episodes to the coloring departments. And though McMahan was not able to offer any confirmation on international distribution for weary fans still waiting for season 1 of the show outside of North America, McMahan did say they were working on it and news would be coming soon. It is clearly something we want to have happen, and there should be news about it fairly soon, he said, but these are conversations that I'm involved in, but not in charge of. McMahan also indicated he had given the writers' room the direction to spend more time in season 2 fleshing out the characters of Tendi and Rutherford, so that, quote, there are 4 leads instead of 2 leads and 2 sidekicks. So good news there for Tendi and Rutherford fans. Overall, McMahan says he's most excited about season 2 because, having established the show and its tone, the writers have felt significantly freer to let their imaginations run wild. McMahan said in the second season, because we weren't having to explain what the show was to ourselves and to an audience, you get some really fun Dr. Ta'ana episodes and even a funny Billups episode, referring to Lieutenant Commander Andy Billups, the chief engineer of the Cerritos. Well, Caleb, are you looking forward to season 2 of Star Trek Lower Decks?
I absolutely am. It brings me much joy to hear McMahan say that, one, they're very far ahead in progress. To me, it sounds like they are almost done with animatics, right? Episode 209, assuming We've got 10 episodes. That's great that the season, at least the storyboards, are mostly done. It's been entirely written. I'm very excited to see how that plays out. We also know that Picard is going to start potentially shooting soon in January, I believe. So that, along with season 4 of Discovery, it makes me wonder if we're going to get Lower Decks earlier than we did this year. I have a feeling we might even get it as early as, May or June. But it will be interesting for sure. I really like the tidbits about Dr. Ta'ana and Billups. I really enjoyed the supporting characters in Lower Decks. Rest in peace, Shax. But I am looking forward to learning more about them. It's also really exciting to hear that Rutherford and Tendi are going to get a little bit more screen time, and that their story is going to be a little more balanced. They definitely had a hard task with this first season of making sure all of the characters were well-rounded when they're establishing all these new ships and places and people and stories. And to have that freedom going into season 2, now that they're already established, I think will just make the already strong ending of season 1 continue to succeed as they go into season 2.
Yeah, I mean, we know at this point that Star Trek Discovery and Picard and Strange New Worlds, that, we're not getting any of those shows early in 2021, not even mid 2021, with Discovery season 4 having gone before the cameras in November. It'll be October of next year, November of next year at the earliest before they're ready for that show to come back. And that's the next one that's filming. So Lower Decks and Star Trek Prodigy, the two animated shows, are really probably what we have to look forward to in 2021. And so it is really exciting that the production for Lower Decks season 2 is moving along so quickly, because I think it means that, yes, we absolutely will get this at some point in 2021. And to your point, it might not be August by the time it's ready. It might be a little sooner, because they were making season 2 back to back and never really stopped. They have sort of been running on season 2 now since pretty much around the same time that season 1 itself aired. So there is a lot to look forward to there. And I think it's just really exciting, the point he was making about, the show itself having been established, the tone of the show, and having, now gotten all of that figured out, they can really sort of run wild with it and feature some of the, characters who maybe haven't gotten so much of an opportunity to breathe and, go into the supporting cast and give them an opportunity to shine, like with Billups, like with Ta'ana. And so I'm just very, very excited to see where that goes. The other thing I thought was really fun in the interview that I didn't talk about up front was that the Pac-led ships from the season 1 finale, first of all, McMahan says the Pac-leds will be back in season 2, but 2, those big sort of ships that they had created in the season finale, apparently the name of them are Battle Harpies. So that's a fun new entry to the Star Trek canon for everybody to enjoy.
I am very excited about that. I'm in the middle of my first Next Generation rewatch. I'm in season 3, but I think season 2 is when Samaritan Snare is on the docket. And so I've recently watched that one. And so it was nice to be able to watch the origin of the Pac-leds, so to speak, before going into Lower Decks and seeing them in season 1. So it's really cool that they're getting more fleshed out. They were kind of meek but cunning at the same time in Samaritan Snare, and now they've gone, it's like a full 180 for them in Lower Decks, and so it's exciting to see where they'll end up going from there. Just the pure size of the Battle Harpy ship kind of reminds me of the Romulan, what's Nero's ship? Can't remember Nero's ship.
The Narada.
Narada, that's right. It reminds me in terms of magnitude of the Narada, and how they're going to just keep adding to that ship, and you'll end up having this behemoth that will ultimately be very intimidating, not just to the Federation, but potentially any other species that they try to take things from. It's kind of, in a way, like Assimilation Light, but, just taking the technology rather than taking the people with it, It's an interesting parallel. I'm excited.
And I personally can't think of a better villain for Star Trek Lower Decks than the Pac-leds, right? I mean, just, what a perfectly calibrated, ridiculous race for an animated comedy, who themselves are, quite threatening. And I think in that season finale for season 1 were quite a threatening adversary in a way that obviously they were not really when they appeared in Samaritan Snare. So I'm definitely looking forward to seeing more of them.
Yeah. And also, too, we know those tidbits related to the Titan potentially making an appearance in the first few episodes of season 2. I'm curious as to see how that storyline shakes down, and if the Pac-leds will be in that part of the early episodes of the season as well, facing down with the Titan and the Cerritos.
Well, last week's episode of Star Trek Discovery, Unification 3, was a surprising follow-up to the Star Trek The Next Generation two-parter, Unifications 1 and 2, and saw that Ambassador Spock's dream of reunification between the Vulcan and Romulan peoples was eventually realized. And in an interview with Ryan Britt, Kirsten Beyer, who was the writer for Unification 3, talked more about the episode and the decision to evolve the Vulcan and Romulan people towards one, as well as Michael finding out about the legacy of her brother. It seemed important to answer the question, had Burnham taken the time yet to find out what became of her brother? Kirsten said. It made sense that she had not yet done so, and was going to be a powerful moment when she finally did. It was just a wonderful thing that the images existed and could be used to put them in a scene together for one last time, referring to, of course, the use of footage from Unifications Part 1 and 2 in the episode of Star Trek Discovery in which Burnham finds out what happened to Spock. You get a scene, a small scene shared between Sonequa Martin Green and Leonard Nimoy's interpretation of the character. Bayer also talked about the decision to include the Coat Malat, introduced earlier this year in Star Trek Picard, in the episode. She said, "I had just finished shooting my episode of Picard where we first met the Coat Malat, so they were very fresh in my mind when we began work on this story. When I returned to the Discovery writers' room and we started to think about Vulcan's distant future, it made sense that at some point in the past, some of the Romulan refugees created by the supernova might have decided to attempt to return home. Spock had certainly planted the seeds, and it was lovely to think they might have truly taken root. But because we have the Coat Malat now as part of Romulan history, it seemed possible to us that an order like that could have been instrumental in bridging the gap between the Vulcans and the Romulans, where trust would have been so very difficult. To have a group of women who were renowned as candid truth tellers just seemed incredibly helpful. And what of the new name for the planet Vulcan following the reunification, that of Ni'Var? Turns out that name has a long Star Trek history, though it's not on the screen. The word first appeared in the 1968 Star Trek fanzine Spockanalia and was originally created by fan Dorothy Jones to mean the existence of two forms, very much like the existence of Vulcans and Romulans on Ni'Var. I just thought it was beautiful and captured perfectly what would be happening on Vulcan should they truly attempt reunification with the Romulans, Bayer said. When something that specific and powerful already exists, it feels wrong not to build upon it. Caleb, what was your reaction to seeing the Vulcans and Romulans successfully reunited in the 32nd century?
It was fantastic for me. There are a couple of things, that I would have liked to see that we didn't, specifically being on the planet of Ni'Var, but I have hope that we will revisit Ni'Var at some point. I do really like the way the kind of courtroom showdown was dressed. I know that was I think it was the mess hall that they ended up dressing down for that. And it was cool to see a lot of the different props and things related to both Vulcan and Romulan cultures, and to just see the level of care they put into connecting it to past iterations of those characters. And so for me, I'm a huge fan of the name Ni'Var. I think that is perfect. I know there's also the brief moment at the end of that episode where Detmer refers to the Fresher. And I know that also came from a novel. I believe the Riansu series.
That's right.
The cool thing is, I am becoming more and more comfortable with Kirsten Bayer being a central figure in the writer's room for both Picard and Discovery, especially given, her background with the Voyager relaunch novels. She's very, very well versed, and she knows what she's doing, and she knows how to call back to things in an effective but simple way and give it a lot of poignance to it. So that part, I think, I was really pleased with the episode in that regard. I also just really liked the amount of growth for Burnham as a character. It's important to note the trend this whole season of her, being the responsibility hoarder and coming to grips with where her actual place is in the universe. And it's so easy for people to just be go, go, go all the time and not actually stop and reflect on what's the limit to your abilities. And ultimately, you need to recognize that you have to stop and reflect at a certain point in order to become comfortable with where you are and what your function is in the environment. So I think it was a really powerful message. It was nice to see her both come into contact with the Romulans and the Vulcans, and then also to reunify with her mother in a sense. It worked on multiple levels, and I really enjoyed the episode.
Man, I love this episode. This is probably my favorite episode of Star Trek Discovery to date. I really liked what they did with the Romulans and the Vulcans. It makes so much sense that if you're going to visit Vulcan with all of those kind of story threads that were established, beginning in unification, running through basically, most Vulcan Romulan appearances throughout the rest of the series, and then pushing through the Kelvin timeline and Star Trek Picard for it to end up in this place where Spock's sort of, legacy mission, which was this massive undertaking of trying to get to, quite different at that point peoples to reunite and sort of realize that they're one, was ultimately successful. I think it's just, what a great idea to do a third part to a two-part episode that premiered 19 years ago. That is quite bold storytelling and the sort of thing that Star Trek could do, and it's so nice to see it actually do. The whole thing was great, and the idea that in order to get access to this data, that Burnham would basically challenge them to the equivalent of an academic debate, and that would be the process through which it took place. I just really like so much about the way that they put it together, the fact that it's not all sort of sunshine and rainbows on Ni'Var, that there are still divisions that they're working through between the Vulcans and the Romulans, and now the sort of Vulcan-Romulan hybrids. There was just such great world building in this episode, and I really, really hope that we return to Ni'Var at some point and get the opportunity to dive a little deeper into it. And I would also love to visit the planet's surface at some point and see what's going on the ground. I think that would be a lot of fun.
It really made me almost wish in a way that this was Unification 3 and 4, but I agree that the world building was awesome and the design elements were fantastic. I have taken a liking to collecting, badges and things of that nature. And I just love the Romulan Idic hybrid badge that they have now. And I think that's going to be a really cool, piece of merchandise to have at one point. I'm sure Fansets is already on it. But it'll be exciting to see those things become available for us consumers.
Well, we reported on this show earlier this year that the team behind the DS9 documentary had set their sights on Star Trek Voyager and creating a new documentary celebrating the show, which is now in the final month of its 25th anniversary celebration. After tagging along on the Star Trek cruise with most of the cast present, executive producer David Zappone indicated in an interview with TrekMovie.com's Shuttlepod podcast that after a COVID-imposed hiatus in production, the documentary is back on track. What we have been doing since, in this world of COVID, Zappone said, is we have been doing individual interviews, socially distant and safely. We have interviewed several of the main cast separately. We just did an interview with Brannon Braga, a very extensive one. We plan to interview Jerry Taylor and Rick Berman and get each one of the cast members individually. It is going to take a little longer than it normally would have, but we will get there. Zappone's co-producer, Joe Kornbrandt, indicated, however, that the Voyager documentary would be different from the popular What We Left Behind documentary on DS9 that was released last year. It's two different series and two different casts, he said. That alone changes the nature of it. What Brannon did say to us is, what are you going to do to top the writer's room, meaning the writer's room portion of What We Left Behind? And he said, we don't have an answer to that yet, but we're working on it. And for those hoping that, like for DS9, a Voyager documentary might include some high-definition footage of the series, Zappone says they're looking into it. Absolutely, I would love to do it again, but I have a feeling it would take another crowdfunding campaign. The people need to approve. I can't convince CBS 100% they want to see it. They need to help us show CBS the desire is there. I would love nothing better. We have the team. We know how to do it. It is time-consuming, but it is not impossible. In addition to the Voyager documentary, Zappone also indicated they are planning a spin-off release for the writer's room portion of the DS9 documentary. We are working on it now, he said. It's the writer's room, and it will also include some of the interviews and things we shot for What We Left Behind that we couldn't make it into the documentary. I think we can be doing What We Left Behind sequels for the next 10 years. Caleb, would you support a crowdfunding effort to get some Voyager HD clips in the new documentary?
There's a really great opportunity here. The question is, which episode do you pick? I think for me, I would love to see clips from Year of Hell in HD. That's probably one of my favorite episodes of Voyager, and it would just be amazing to see all the different effects in that particular episode redone with an HD lens. The writer's room aspect is really cool to me too. It makes me wonder if they will potentially do, rather than a season 8 of Voyager, what if they took a scene or something from one of Kirsten Bayer's novels, the relaunch novels, and then did like a storyboard, or like they acted it out like a table read kind of thing? That would be really cool, especially because so many people are fans of her books as well. And that did a really good job of continuing the story of Voyager after they returned home. going to be interesting. I'm very excited for this documentary.
Yeah, I love that. And of course, I am there day one for high definition. I gave money for the high definition upgrade for the clips that were in What We Left Behind, and I will happily do the same again for Voyager. I thought that was a tremendous success. TrekCore recently released the gallery of screen caps of high definition footage from the series. And, it really is night and day. I was watching Emissary the other day on Amazon Prime and just lamenting how terrible the episode looks on streaming, and it doesn't look a whole lot better on DVD. And so it was so nice to get some crystal clear HD footage for Deep Space Nine, and I would love the same for Voyager. So I'm really looking forward to this one. I think that's a great idea about doing something with the relaunch novels. As you say, you can't do the same thing twice, and so the season 8 writers room probably wouldn't be as successful a second time, even though I would love it. But I'm really excited to see what they come up with.
Yeah, me too. And the other thing that they mentioned there was the DS9 writers room continuing and really continuing as a way to kind of coach other creatives to enter that sphere. Like, here's how the writers room works. Here's how we start a story. Here's how we break out and brainstorm, and just the whole process. And I think, one of the great things about the franchise now, and it goes back to Una McCormick and Kirsten Beyer and, a lot of the novelists that we have now, a lot of them started writing fan fiction and then got noticed, and they just are now either writing books for the franchise, or they're now writing stories for actual episodes or running parts of the franchise. And, to kind of give an inside look at a writer's room like that, it could definitely inspire, the next generation of Trek fans to get involved with the franchise and potentially help lead it one day.
And lastly this week, Star Trek licensee Ukonic have released 2 new Star Trek-themed homeware products to bring the 24th century to your kitchen and your bar cart. First up, a set of LCARS-themed dinnerware. The set, which includes 4 11-inch dinner plates, 4 9-inch salad plates, 4 7-inch decorated bowls, and 4 12-ounce mugs, has an LCARS theme. It's black, and then it's got the sort of LCARS design on the plates and the mugs itself. And critically, in a big change from other similar sets, is both microwave and dishwasher safe, which is a huge selling point in my opinion, because everybody has a microwave at this point, everybody has a dishwasher, so why you're making things that won't go in both of them, I don't know. But luckily for this, you can put it in both the microwave and the dishwasher. You can purchase a set now from Ukonic for $119.99. Follow the link in the show notes on TrekCore.com in order to order. And in addition to the dinnerware, Ukonic have also released a whiskey decanter set suitable for any Galaxy-class starship, with etchings for the USS Enterprise D, the Starfleet Delta, and the Federation flag. And that set can be purchased for $99.99. And coming soon from the licensee, which is perfectly timed for the winter months, are a set of original Star Trek Galileo and Next Generation Type 6 shuttlecraft slippers. No word yet, though, on exactly when you can expect them to be warming your tootsies. Well, Caleb, think you'll pick up any of these new products?
I definitely need a new pair. It's getting cold, and obviously it's a podcast, so you can't see, but I'm wrapped in a Star Trek blanket right now and enjoying the the cold weather. The LCARS plates just look awesome. If I had the space for them, I think I definitely would. I wish they actually sold the mugs individually, because I really like the beverage labels on those. Those look really cool. I would love to get some LCARS themed mugs. And I really like the decanter too. I already have 2 decanters. I don't have much use for a third one, but I really like how it's kind of like a square bottom, but they have kind of twisted and warped the glass in a way, so it has like this spiral effect at the bottom. And it actually is a really beautiful set. And the glasses are that way too. So maybe I'll end up treating myself to the decanter set at some point, but yeah, I have to save up some more money first for that.
Well, I mean, if you accidentally slip and, one of your existing decanters just happens to meet a sticky end, this would be the perfect replacement for it.
Oh, absolutely.
All right. Well, we've talked about the facts, and now let's speculate on what's going to happen in the future of Star Trek.
You make some very good points, Captain. But it's still all speculation and theory.
So each week, I and my guest give you a wish or theory we're nurturing about any of the shows or the future of the franchise. So Caleb, let's hear your theory or wish for this week.
Okay, so my theory, and this is again inspired by our Ready Room clip that we mentioned earlier in the episode. I have a feeling that And this is also drawing inspiration from a thread from Una McCormack's novel, The Last Best Hope. I have a feeling that there will be some link between the hinted at manufactured destruction of Romulus and the Temporal Cold War. They hinted in the novel that essentially the star went supernova on purpose. And so something had to have caused that. And I feel like they're trying to build up that link in some way, both in Discovery and Picard and the novels, to link us to the Temporal Cold War. And I do think that essentially we'll see some Temporal Cold War stuff in Picard seasons 2 and or 3 as well.
That is very interesting. Yeah, I have to say, I am really surprised by the number of times they have referenced the Temporal Cold War in Discovery. I thought in that very first episode where Burnham tells Book she's just come through time, and Book says something about how time travel has been banned since the Temporal Wars, that was going to be the one and done mention. That was it. Nod to the fans who watched Enterprise and say, yeah, we recognize, that happened within a couple of 100 years of this part of history that we're now in. We're nodding to it, and now we're moving on. And yet it has come up 3-4 times thus far over the course of the series. It does not feel to me that this show goes out of its way to provide that kind of level of what is effectively fan service without ultimately having some reason for doing so. And so I think that's a fairly compelling theory, Caleb. I like the Star Trek Picard tie-in too. You're right, the novel does sort of go in this direction where it seems to indicate that, this supernova within the Romulan Empire is maybe not, a purely natural phenomenon. And so there are a bunch of questions around that. And I think there's now a bunch of questions about this sort of potential sort of temporal parallel universe, maybe tie into Discovery, which it kind of has always had, because since season 1, one of the core story arcs of that season was the mirror universe. And so Discovery, even though it moved away from that in season 2, has always had this sort of temporal idea, this parallel universe type idea to it. And so I'm curious to see whether and how they continue to build on that. And I think that's a very interesting way of doing it. I think one of my previous guests maybe had suggested that the Section 31 show could be sort of a Star Trek Sliders, where Georgiou was sort of hopping across various different parallel universes. And maybe that little teaser we talked about at the top of next week's episode is our entree to doing so. I guess we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah. And, it could even go back to some of the previous events, like you said, in Discovery, like season 1, the first time we went to the mirror universe, we have to think about what displaced Mirror Lorca in the first place. And it makes me wonder if maybe there was a temporal incursion there. They didn't really explain it well, but maybe that was also something that was manufactured. And it makes me wonder how much of the Temporal Cold War actually stretched across multiple times and places outside of just Enterprise. So they very well could continue to build and end up giving us maybe a more satisfactory ending than what we got in Enterprise.
Very exciting. Well, we will just have to see what happens. Well, my wish this week is I received within the last week a copy of the Voyager Celebration book by Ben Robinson. It's a nice, thick, hardbound book in which he did a whole bunch of new interviews with cast and creatives for Star Trek Voyager about their experiences on the show. We talked in the last episode about some of the sort of newsy pieces that are in there, like talking about for the first time, giving sort of the full story behind Jennifer Lean's departure from the show. And I'm not all the way through, but I have just started it and I'm really enjoying it. And Ben had hinted on Twitter the potential that this may not be a one-off, that they might be interested in doing a series of books along the same lines, doing the same kind of thing. And I would love for them to do one for Star Trek Enterprise, which is celebrating its 25th anniversary next year. So my wish is, I really like the Voyager Celebration book. Let's get a Star Trek Enterprise one next. Caleb, what do you think?
I haven't had a chance to pick up this book yet, but it's on my list. They put out a ton of books in the past month, and in the coming month we have all those coffee table books that are coming out, most of them from Ben Robinson and Hero Collector. And I'm very excited for some of those when I get a chance to pick them up. I would love to see an Enterprise book. I'm fresh off my Enterprise watch, and I really enjoyed Enterprise. It was nice to come to it this late in the game compared to everyone else when you saw it live in the early 2000s. And I feel like there are several things that it'd be great to have background on. And, especially just knowing how available the cast are, or the majority of the cast at least are, to interviews and whatnot. And, Scott Bakula did a panel this past summer, I think, or maybe it was Star Trek Day he joined in. But it'd be cool to hear some more from him. It'd be great to hear more from Dominic Keating, and it'd be great just to hear a lot of different voices. I would love to hear more about Jolene Blaylock, but I don't know if we'll quite get that. But it'd be great to hear some more about the background of that show. So yeah, I'm excited for it.
Do you have a theory or a wish for Discovery, Picard, Lower Decks, or the future of the franchise that you'd like to share? Tweet them to me at WeeklyTrek, and I might feature your theory in a future episode. Well, that's all the time we've got for this episode of Weekly Trek. Thank you so much to my guest, Caleb Dorsh, for joining me today. Caleb, how can people contact you if they want to continue the conversation?
I am in the Twitter sphere at RogueMogue, RogueMough. And my account's currently open. I don't have it private or anything like that. So feel free to follow and start a conversation, and I'll be happy to continue with you all.
And you can find this show on Twitter at WeeklyTrek and me at Alexander T. Perry. And if you enjoy the show, please consider leaving us a 5-star review on your podcast player of choice. And please check out some of the other great shows on the Tricorder transmissions. And if you like our shows, please also consider becoming a Patreon of Tricorder, which you can find at patreon.com/the Tricorder transmission. And lastly, if you're looking for Star Trek news on the internet, I hope you will turn to TrekCore.com. Well, thank you, Caleb. Thank you to all of my listeners. And until next week, live long and prosper.